quiet for the first time.
Different.
I'll call the meeting to order. I'd like to make the following statement. I'd like to begin by acknowledging that we are in Treaty 1 territory and the traditional homeland of the Métis Nation. I'll introduce the panel members. I'm Marcel Rondo. I'll be chairing. Linda McFadden to my left, Sandy Tapper to my far left. The assessor today is Kem Wong. Our administrative assistant today will be Michelle Lapin. We will be hearing applications for revision of assessment roll in accordance with the Municipal Act. The matters for which revision is requested have been described in each application, and we will limit the discussions to those matters. The statements that the applicant or the assessor make at this hearing are sworn testimony, and anyone speaking to the matter must be sworn in. Be advised that comparisons of assessment of properties are not considered evidence of market value by the Board of Revision. The Board of Revision is appointed annually by Council and is independent of it and the City Administration. It makes its decisions on the basis of the evidence provided at the hearing and issues a written order that we mail to all parties as soon as possible. Please note that the Board's decision with respect to an application may be appealed to the Municipal Board if the matter pertains to assessed value or classification, or to the Court of Queen's Bench if the matter pertains to the application of exemption from taxation. Should you wish to appeal, information on how to do so will be included with the Board order. With respect to the hearing process, I will confirm the matters to be addressed with each applicant following the swearing in. We will then have the assessor's testimony followed by questions that the other applicant may have, and then the applicant's testimony followed by questions. Each side will have an opportunity to summarize if they wish. Once all the evidence about the application has been brought forward, the applicant may leave. The process will repeat for each item on the docket today, and the session will close after all the applications have been heard, and the Board will deliberate in private and make its decisions. You will receive an order by registered mail as soon as possible. As information, all public hearings are live stream recorded and will be part of the public record. I stumbled on that one enough, didn't I? Lordy, lordy. Okay, let's start at the top. And the first property will be 363 Mountain. Kem, when you are ready. Well, after you're sworn in, I'm sorry.
Do you sworn in or affirm? Affirm? Can you state your full name, please?
Kem Wong.
Do you affirm that the evidence you're about to give at this hearing is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
Yes, ma'am.
Can you state your full name, please?
Trevor Glenn Smith.
Do you swear that the evidence you're about to give at this hearing is to be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
I do.
Go ahead, Kem.
The subject property is 363 Mountain. The roll number is 14100123875. The residential apartment block that's 3 stories high. It was built in 1910 and has 23 suites with 7 outdoor parking stalls. On page 2, the sales history of the subject property. This property was converted to from condos in I believe it was sometime after the 2013 sale. The 2013 sale is just the value of all the condo units that were sold and then combined into the apartment building by the current owner. On page 3 is our income valuation summary. We use average rents of $580 to get a potential income of $160,000. Use a 2.8% vacancy to get an effective gross income of $155,000, and a 59% expense ratio to get a net operating income of $63,000. At the 6.75%, we have an estimated market value of $944,000. On page 4 are our rent comparables, showing that the rents we used are in line with what's on the market. On page 5 is information on how we derived our cap rates and cap rates from other organizations. On page 7. are some ads for the subject property. Because the property was merged, the current roll number doesn't have any income and expense information. But we feel that the rents are supported by the market, and the 59% expense ratio is reasonable for a building that has had a reasonable amount of work done to it, as indicated by the ad. And also the previous sales support the assessed value. They have to maintain the assessed value of $944,000.
That's it for your information?
Yes.
Questions, Trevor?
The assessed value, right, work up on page 3, that's all model driven, all
Yes.
of those components? That's my only question.
Linda, any questions?
Did you inspect this property?
I did not.
Sandy, any
No
questions?
questions.
This was, when did they convert it back from condos to apartments? What year?
2016,
2016?
I believe so, yes.
And yet you still don't have any sheets on it?
Well, the thing is, we would be looking for information, income and expense information from 2015
Okay,
and 14 and 13, no.
so it's later on in 16 that they got it.
Yeah, I believe it was early in 2016, but even if we would have sent them the information, they might not have had any income and expense information to submit. But yeah, it was merged in 2016, as far as I can tell.
Your rentals, church. Any of your rentals been, the ones you're showing on page 4, have any of those been renovated?
I'm not sure.
Have you inspected any of those properties?
I have not inspected the comparables, no. You know, I actually, I actually whited out some of the rents for, in the ads that I saw. And maybe I didn't need to, because they were, I guess, early in 2016,
Mm-hmm.
but,
How early in 2016 was it?
February 1st.
It was early enough, wasn't it?
Yeah, what?
And it was early enough.
Yeah, and
What was the rent that you
I was
went
trying to.
Trying to figure it out.
That was my next question, so you got one up on me.
Well, it looks like the 2-bedroom was $695.
$695 was the asking.
Yeah, that was the asking, and the one bedroom looks like it was. I can't really make it out, I'm sorry.
Trevor might have that information. We'll probably end up asking him. No further questions. Trevor, on to you, please.
Okay, so 363 Mountain. If you look at the cover photo, you can see the front exterior of the building. It's actually two structures on site. You can flip to page number 3 for a little brief rundown on it. There's 23 total units, 6 bachelors, 10 one-beds, and 7 two-bedroom units. And the structure was built in 1910. We move on to my page number, beginning on page 4, running through page 8. We have photos of the subject. So the property had a fire at the end of 2016, December 13th, 2016. The property underwent a fire, which drew the fire crews and burnt 2 units, I believe, in the property, with other smoke damage occurring after that. So if you look at the top and bottom of page 4, you can see the exterior blackening and burnt out units where it's showing it there right on the front. In general, physical condition of the structure itself is quite poor. You can see that from the photos as we go through here. The foundation is a 1910 foundation, and you can obviously see the condition of that. Broken windows at the rear and front of the building in many cases. Just generally very run down. Mailboxes broken into on a regular basis for identity theft. The units that were burnt have not been redone at this point. They're still boarded up, as you can see in the photos. And then we have a couple of interior photos of the common area, and you can see the general condition of the interior, as well as graffiti on the exterior and broken entry phones and locks, etc. So this is the type of property that we are dealing with here. Again, foundation cracking, spalling of the exterior masonry, holes, exterior wall cracks, poor fire escape condition, etc. Vandalism and graffiti on the exterior. And then we have the interior as shown with graffiti, physical damage, broken locks, older carpeting, broken into mailboxes, etc. As well as the fire damage from the fire in December 2016. So they remain with 2 units that are non-occupiable at this point out of 23. And the general condition is shown there. Now, I do have to state, I visited the property twice. I was not able to gain access to any of the units in order to inspect them, so I can't show you the interior of the units because I was not able to access that. Moving onwards onto page 10, site description. You can see the layout of the site. Yes, there's parking available on the site. I've been there twice. I've yet to see a car parked on the front parking pad, so there is no income from that. The location is shown on page 11. It is in the North End, William White, St. John's area. Definitely a tough region. About 1.5, 2 blocks off of Main Street into that area. And we can move on from there to the valuation itself. I've included the rent structure from the relevant time frame there. You can see the rents that they were achieving in my chart in the middle of page 13. So these were the rents that they were asking. They weren't necessarily getting full occupancy and full rent on all of these, but these were their asking rents. So at 100% occupancy and achieving their asking rents, they would get $180,696 at 100% occupancy with no rental discounts. We provide some rental comparables after that, and we have gone with their gross potential rent of $180,696. Now, that figure, I would suggest, is not one that they would be achieving on the property, and we'll get to that. Actually, I'll draw attention to that now. I did provide in the addenda materials for the brief a rundown on the rent roll and the expenses that the current property manager had for 2015. They took over property management of it in May, June of 2015, so they don't have a full year of history to show you. However, they're in that 7 month time frame. They had residential rent of $113,000 less discounted rent of $4,500 and less residential vacancy of $11,832. So while they were projecting they're getting 113, they're not actually.
What were they getting then?
113 less, call it, about $16,000 roughly.
That'd be roughly 90.
In 7 months. Now, that's at that time frame. So subsequent to that, they have a fire at the end of 2016. I've also provided information from that time frame, as it's probably relevant for panel to understand. They had projected $182,000 in gross rent for 2016. Discount rent was just under $14,000, and then they had vacancy of about $9,000. So they achieve a lot less than the actual 100% occupancy of $180,000. And then following the fire, rent again slightly higher at $184,451, with obvious significant vacancy due to the fire, $93,000, and discounted rent of $8,500. So it's all pointing towards $180,000. Yes, that is what their maximum would be, but no, they don't actually achieve that amount, as pointed out by the vacancy and the discounted rent that they're forced to put in place in order to rent the units. Now, we would provide income and expense information from before that, but as pointed out, it's not available. Moving on to page 15 and vacancy. So I provided the stats for vacancy in Winnipeg and in the area. The 2-bedroom vacancy for the area, Lord Selkirk, was 4.9%, 1 bedroom 2.3%, and the overall 3.2%. Subject property in 2016 was showing roughly 4.3% vacancy at the time, and following year, obviously subsequent to the fire, they had 53% vacancy. Now, that's not a normal circumstance, and we wouldn't expect that to completely carry forward. However, they do have 2 units that are non-occupiable. 2 units out of 23 is 8.7% of the property that is non-occupiable, non-rentable. That's before attributing any actual rental allowance. So we've used a 10% vacancy rate in our projections. Moving on to the expense allowance. 2015 operating expenses for 7 months, $55,000. If you extrapolate this out to the full year, it would come to $94,425. In 2016, operating expenses came to $92,224. 2017, the year following the fire.
What page are you on now?
I'm on page 15. Just going through sequentially through the report. Going sequentially through the report. So in 2017, we had operating expenses post-fire of $115,322 with repair and maintenance of roughly $1,256 per suite, which is not out of line normally for a property of this vintage and in this condition. Now, we've also had a fire, so there's no exaggeration there with fire repairs for R&M. That's simply a norm. So in order to accurately reflect expenses for the property, we have used this figure less a deduction of 1.5% to reduce the expenses back to the 2016 level, giving us $113,592. Again, this is based on the actuals for the property. Summarizing this into a net operating income on page 16, you can see that we come down to $49,034. So we have a projected 100% occupancy rent of $180,696, which they don't achieve. We've attributed 10% vacancy to this, 2 units being vacant on an ongoing basis, being 8.7%, with a minor allowance for additional vacancy. 10%, not out of line. And using the actual expenses for the property in the post-reference period, but bringing them back to the correct period, we have $113,592 in expenses. So the NOI is certainly a reasonable projection for the property. Capitalization rate, beginning on page 17, we have a chart of properties that have sold in the Winnipeg market. These were all properties that were purchased for the in-place income. There was no upside to the potential of these buildings upon purchase. They had all been renovated. They weren't converted to condominiums with one exception, that being 432 Furby, which has since underachieved on its goals at 6%. The cap rate range that we're showing here goes from the low of 5.44% at 333 Ward up to 6.4% at 210 Jameson, just off of Henderson Highway. Now, subject property is in that north end area. If you look at the top of my page 20, we have a bit of discussion on this. The property was built in 1910. Obviously, the structure itself is in poor condition, significant deferred maintenance and structural damage. There was the building fire that occurred. It's in an area that's considered a much higher risk area for investment by lenders and investors. Indeed, it's difficult to get financing on buildings in this particular area, in that you often have to go to secondary lenders and put down significantly more money, and often your interest rate is higher as well. The area it's considered a higher risk area for higher vacancy, frequency of bad debt, lower rental rates, higher levels of crime, and significant property damage that frequently occurs, as you can see. Also, the social problems that one runs into in this area of drug and alcohol addiction, property damage, etc. It's not considered an investment grade property or area, never would be, so there should be a premium applied to the capitalization rate for any property in this area. So we have used 7% as our capitalization rate, and using this figure gives us a market value of $700,000. Now, if you flip to the addenda of my brief, you can see decisions from the Board of Revision in this cycle on properties that are in a very similar area, that being the West End Spence area, in which 7% capitalization rate was used in all of these decisions as well. For the most part, my net income as presented to the panel. So that is my presentation. Thank you.
Kim, any questions?
So you're saying you're estimating the expenses for, I guess first of all, like, for you guys, are we allowed to use post-reference information?
Well, you shouldn't be, no.
No? Okay,
We don't put much weight on it, put it that way.
okay.
So, can I respond to
Yes, you may.
the question asked? So the reason for presenting that information is obviously we've had a fire occurring in the end of 2016, and it has an impact on the operation of the property, and obviously the condition after that time frame would be relevant to the valuation of the property. So it's a reasonable approach to present that information and bring it back to the proper valuation timeframe.
Further questions, Kim?
No, I was just wondering, like, you know, where.
The only thing
where
is,
the board stands.
he's trying to put forward the present condition of the building,
Yeah,
so if you want to question him on that.
well, yeah, the present condition is fine, but like, finances after that.
Yeah, well, we'll ask him the question.
Yeah, yeah. I just wanted to see what you guys felt about that.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I guess the estimated expenses for 15 and 16 were about 94,000, and you're stabilizing at 114,000 from 2017?
No, it's not a stabilization necessarily. I looked at the expenses incurred prior to the fire and the expenses after, and the expenses after are much more representative of a normal operating expense for a property of this vintage to start with. And it's not just that there were some, obviously, R&M required from the fire, it's that it brought it up to more of a norm as far as expenses for property of that vintage. The R&M was quite low prior to that time frame, which is reflected in the condition of the property.
Okay. No more questions.
Linda, any questions?
I have no question.
Sam?
Is there no parking or laundry income
No.
at all? Okay. And you said that this it's post-reference granted, but it's a 7-month period and you've extrapolated to come up with an annual figure?
So no, the 7-month period was during 2015 when
Okay.
the current property manager took over. The income is from the rents at the relevant time frame. It's not post-reference. I was just referring that to the other material to show you that that income level was not actually being achieved.
Okay, thank you.
On your addendum, you put some board orders on there. Can you tell me, you said it affected the cap rate. Did they not go at 6.75?
They did not.
That's what it says
So-
here on the bottom.
So
The
let's
decision
go.
is based on a revised net operating income and a cap rate of
Okay,
6.75.
So let's go through them.
Okay.
We flip to the addenda and go just past the very last 2017 Arbor Management Income Statement page. So the very first, keep going. There's not just one there, there's a number of them.
Or you're using these ones over here.
So what I've done, I'm not sure if you're there yet.
You're telling me I shouldn't have looked at the ones at the back of the package.
Well, I included a number and I included the other one for reference as well. So we have 485 Furby, decision based on the evidence presented by the applicant. Then we have the cover page of my brief and the summary of how the value was
I'm
arrived
still
at.
looking for that page.
Okay, so
What does the page look like?
this is the very last page before
That's
it.
this one,
Yes. And flip,
with one?
order, revision order.
No,
Okay, keep going.
Revision order, front page of your.
flip,
Very
order,
good.
vision order, yeah.
485 for B being the first one. So decision based on the evidence presented by the applicant. So that doesn't tell you anything, so I show you the evidence from the applicant following that.
And that was,
7% and my NOI comes to 975. Then we have 480 Young, same thing, based on the evidence presented by the applicant. Following 2 pages show you my information, 7% and my NOI.
okay,
Then we have 615 Sherbrooke, same thing. Presented by the applicant. And to move on, capitalization rate of 7% and my NOI gives you the value that was arrived at.
okay.
Same thing for 583 Furby. And these properties were all in similar condition as well. Then we have 693 Maryland, which is somewhat different, and I provided it for perspective,
What was different?
which is net operating income, revised net operating income and a cap rate of 6.75%.
What,
And there's 3 of those, that's
Yeah.
how you can see.
So 3 went at 6.75 and 3 went at 7, is that what you were telling him? There were 3 that had 7%.
4 or 5 were at 7%,
Okay.
and there are 3, I guess we have here at 6.75% with a revised NOI. Now, the properties are all in the same area. I don't necessarily agree with the last decisions, but I have included them for you there. 737 Sargent is, yeah, it's extremely tough building that should not be receiving a 6.75% cap rate. I think 7% is generous to it. That's beside the point.
since the fire,
Mhm.
you must have fire insurance on the building, do they not?
I imagine they do, but
Would
I
that not
can't
be
tell you for
paying,
sure.
I don't see anything on your income, even though it's post, that shows any of the revenue from the insurance, because do they not normally carry the rental loss as well on their insurance?
Well, one would hope so. So if I flip to 2017, we can see insurance income replacement of 73,588. So yes, they have insurance on it.
So the 73,000, but you didn't show that in your income makeup on your page.
On my actual valuation?
Yeah,
No.
you didn't show that as income. But you were
So-
trying, and you're trying to say that it's not being rented out and that there's a loss of income.
Well,
Are you not?
let's- So, let's be clear here, so.
I'm trying to be.
The page number 20, so we have 180,696
Yep.
in potential gross income from the building.
Yeah,
All of the information pre-post-fire that I show you indicates that they don't actually achieve that rental level. So
Yeah.
I'm going with that, that's what their rents are,
Yeah.
that they can achieve, they don't get them, there's discounted rents, etc. I'm still going with that number. Subsequently, they have a fire. We have 2 units that are non-occupiable. That's 8.7% of the potential rent for the building, 8.7% of the units,
yeah.
with a minor addition to that for vacancy of 1.7%. You look at the condition of this building, it's not in great condition. The units inside, I haven't necessarily seen. What I can tell you is that many of these buildings that have had these renovations, that have gang and drug and issues such as that, renovations occur and then they're rather quickly trashed after that. So you're not moving into a brand spanking new building that's great inside. You're moving into a building in a tough area that has had some renovation. So the 186.96, it's a bit of a, yes, it could be achieved, but no, it's not. So whether they're getting insurance income back for that space is somewhat irrelevant. They have 2 units that you cannot put tenants into, so whether they're getting income for it or not, they're not in condition to be rented going forward.
94,000 was the income actual income for 7 months. What does that put it for income per month?
94 per month?
You said it was 94,000 was for 7 months was their actual income, correct? Based on your information.
Well,
You said it was 94,000
right.
for 7 months. So if we were to project a full year out of that at that same rate, because where do you come in at? You're coming,
Comes to 161,142.
very close to the city number, isn't it?
That is close, yes. I would agree.
Now, your vacancy rate, you're bumping that up because of the fire? Is that part of the reason?
No, not because of the fire, but if you look at both their actual vacancy,
Which is?
their vacancy in 2015 prior to this, and again, only in those 7 months, appeared to be about 4.5%, I think it was. They subsequently have the fire, and they have essentially a built-in 8.7% vacancy for the building, and that they have 2 non-occupiable units.
Which they're receiving payment for.
Sure. I'm fine with you if you go with the city's income. That's really not an issue. I think we're getting a little off track here.
Well,
The expense
no,
side-
because I'm trying to figure out, you're trying to go from, what did the city give you for your, I'm looking here, they went 2.8 for a vacancy, is that correct? I know. The effective gross rent is still cheaper in the city. What, the issue becomes the expense allowance, and I haven't gotten to that line yet. So what are you putting in your, let's go down to, the thing is, go to the expense allowance at 69.85%. What drove that to that height? Did you talk about some of the fire that brought that expense up, because you had it listed as an expense from the fire repairs?
I did not specifically refer to it as being fire related. If you look at the information presented in the addenda, and we have 2015 information for 7 months, which, flip to my expense page, we have 7 months. If you extrapolate that out to the full year, it comes to 94,425. This is particularly low for a property of this vintage. 2016, prior to the fire, came to $92,224 in 2016. Now, all of that information is in the addenda, and what I would point out to you, the R&M for the property for 2016 was $14,281, or $621 per suite for a building built in 1910 of this condition. That's exceptionally low. It's not not appropriate. If you look at the expenses following that, we have $115,322 with R&M of $28,878 or $1,256 per suite. This is a much more normal figure for repair and maintenance for a building such as this to start with. So it's not that the R&M is driven up by fire damage. It's that this is a more normal expense level to be at in the first place. That was much lower than what one would normally see in the expenses prior to that time frame.
Anything in summation, Ken?
I guess the previous sales of the subject property support the assessment and actually maintain the assessed value.
Anything in summation, Trevor?
The previous sale of the property was based on purchasing condominium units of a building and is not in consideration. We have a property that had a fire and has 2 non-occupiable units. I think that my point is clear.
Okay. Thank you very much for your presentation on that one. Let's move on to the next one, which will be 187 Jarvis. Ken, when you are ready.
The subject property is 187 Jarvis. It's a multi-use property with apartments and commercial on the main floor. It's 3 stories high. It was built in 1909, but we have an effective year built in 1945 to reflect the renovation work. There are 20 suites with 5 outdoor parking stalls. On page 2 is the sales history of the subject property. Last sold in 2011 for $370,000. On page 3 is our income valuation summary. For the apartment, we use average rents of $645 to get a potential income of $154,000. We use a 2.8% vacancy to get an effective gross income of $150,000. And we use the 59% expense ratio to get a net operating income of $61,000. Capped at 6.75%, we have an estimated market value of $912,000. There's also a retail income stream beside the apartment income stream, giving a value of $66,000. On page 6 are some commercial rent comparables to show that the rents
Page 5 is
sorry, on page 4. Sorry, on page 4 is are the rates that we use for the apartment and the rates that we use for the retail. $645 for the apartments and $7.32 for the commercial space. On page 5 are our apartment rent comparables, showing that the rents we've used are in line with what's on the market. On page 6 are some commercial rent comparables showing that the rents that we've used are a little bit lower than market. On page 7 is a summary of the income and expenses provided by the owner. Their potential income was about $152,000. Their expenses were $55,000, and it gives them a net operating income of about $92,000. But it's difficult to say. That information is probably a little bit off because it doesn't seem like, just from past experience, the mailer that they submitted, it's supposed to be for a full year, and it doesn't indicate anything else other than it is for a full year, but as for with other properties, it might be for 7 months. So it's just the page 7 is just a summary of what was presented on the in the 2015 mailer. On page 8 is information on how we derived our cap rates and cap rates from other organizations. On page 10 are some pictures of the subject property. one of my colleagues inspected this property in 2015. On page 13 is the 2015 mailer submitted by the owner. On page 216. The potential income indicated by the owner is about $152,000, which is very close to what the model has estimated at $154,000. And the last couple of pages are some permits that were taken out to for some alterations and fire damage repair. The declared construction values are $750,000 and $600,000. So to conclude, the rents that the model has estimated are supported by the market and by the 2015 mailer. The 59% expense ratio is reasonable for a building that's been renovated. And when you look at the permit values for the property, 750,000 and 600,000, I believe that supports the assessed value of 978,000, and as they maintain the assessed value at 978,000.
Questions, Trevor?
Was the property inspected following the fire to the building?
I believe it was inspected prior.
Okay. And the income and expense summary that you have on page number 7, that would be representative of the 7 months that were reported for operating expenses?
It didn't indicate 7 months, no.
Okay, but again, as I believe you had mentioned, it's your understanding from
It might
other
be
properties that it would be 7 months.
Might be for sure, for less
Okay.
than a full year.
Okay, those are all my questions, thank you.
Sandy, any questions?
No,
Linda?
I don't have any questions.
The, during any of the reconstruction or the repairs, did they put a sprinkler system in this building now? Because usually after a fire, they end up having to put them in. I'm surprised that. Prior to the fire, it had no system in it.
I'm not sure if they added a sprinkler system or not. Doesn't seem to indicate so in the permits.
What page did you do your calculation on?
Page
Hmm?
7.
Page 7? That's yours?
It's a summary of the 2015 mailer.
Yeah. And on yours, it's got an NOI of 61,000. Okay, no further questions. On to your presentation, Trevor, please.
Thank you. So 187 Jarvis, I'll direct you to my page number 11 for the location. This is located in the Point Douglas area, just north of The train track underpass at Higgins, it fronts on Main Street and the side street of Jarvis. There are two addresses for the building, I think it's 185 and 187. And there is a very small commercial component in the front section fronting on Main Street. Page number 3 gives you a very brief rundown. The building was built in 1909 and 1919 for the two sections. We have 20 total units, 1 bachelor, 13 one-bedroom units, and 6 two-bedroom units is the breakdown for the building. The photos for the property are shown beginning on page number 4 and moving through it. This is a building that has had significant gang issues, as you can see as we go through the photos. They will essentially move into a building and take over some units and evict the people themselves and ensure that the money continues getting paid so that the ownership or management isn't necessarily aware. Obviously, management takes care of those issues when they become aware of them, but the gangs do tend to focus on particular buildings, and it's an ongoing issue with this particular site and location for them, largely because of the location. As you can see from the photos, we again have identity theft through break-into the mailboxes, significant damage to the common areas, lots of signs of gang graffiti and tagging, and the damage to individual units of break-ins through the doorways, etc. And you can see the interior of the units at the bottom of page 7 and the top of page 8. So yes, there have been some renovations that were done to the building. You can see that they are of a relatively basic nature. Yes, some renos, but it's not a beautiful building by any means. The additional thing to focus on with this building again is that they had a fire that occurred in January 20th of 2016, and it was determined to be arson, as you can see from the articles that I include in the addenda materials. There was extensive damage from the fire and the fire suppression efforts with the water, and it had to undergo subsequent repair and replacement of some of the materials for the building following that time frame. As shown, personal safety, again, significant issue in this building with the criminal activity that has occurred within the building through no fault of the ownership. So the location significantly challenged, significant social issues within the building with drug and criminal activity. Let's move on to the valuation itself. We have included the rental structure as of the valuation date on my page number 13, and the chart at the middle of the page comes to $152,316 for the gross potential rent at 100% occupancy. So we have used that as our income. Again, that's the actuals. The vacancy for the property, we have a chart at the top of page 15. They haven't had above normal vacancy, so we have used the city's 2.8% vacancy. Yes, there's fire-induced vacancy, but we're not making additional allowance for that as the units have been repaired. The expense allowance is shown at the bottom of page 15. 2015 income and expense questionnaire, which represented only 7 months, was expenses of $55,086. You extrapolate this to a full year, we have $94,433. First full year operating expenses following the fire come to $99,428. So in absence of a true figure for the full 2015 year, we are using an operating expense total of $95,000 as a reasonable estimate of operating expenses for the property. Now, this is summarized on page 16 and brings us down to a net operating income of $53,051. So again, the actual potential rent for the building, they're not able to achieve higher than that as residential tenancies limits are in place. We've given a standard vacancy to it, and we've made very reasonable projection of the expense allowance for the building at $95,000. The capitalization rate chart on page 17 remains the same as in the property that we just discussed. Now, again, let's look at the location of this property. It's shown on page number 11. We're in Point Douglas, right on Main Street, just north of the train tracks. This is not an investment property of any kind that would show up on the charts of the main commercial brokerages. It's certainly a higher risk area to lend in. And you would see any investors having to put down more capital, as well as probably get their lending in many circumstances from secondary lenders in locations such as this. So we have used the same 7% cap rate. You can see the discussion regarding this on page number 20. Again, we have the same activities, if not of a greater level for this property of gang activity, drug and alcohol addiction, property damage, etc. So using that 7% and our NOI of $53,051, we come to a market value of $758,000 for the multifamily portion of the building. Page number 21, we deal with the commercial section of the building. It's 1,020 square feet, a very small storefront, essentially right on Main Street. You can see a picture of it at the top of page 4 from the exterior. And we're not in disagreement over the rental rate or the cap rate or the expense allowance, etc. We are in dispute on vacancy. Looking at this section of North Main, that close in that specific area, it's not a high demand area, obviously, for tenancies. You do tend to have much greater vacancy in that immediate area, and the building itself was vacant through all of 2015, from January 2015 all through 2015 through 2016 and up to the current day. The property, the main floor tenancy remained vacant. Now they have, I believe, found a tenant at this particular point in time, and they're working on it now. But obviously, vacancy is a long-term issue here. So we've applied a 20% vacancy to our valuation, and using the other parameters, this gives us a value of $46,000 for that unit. And the addenda materials remain the same as the other presentation, with obviously the different income statements for this property. And I'm open for questions.
Cam?
No questions.
Sandy?
I have no questions.
Linda?
I don't have any questions. How about you?
Yeah.
I've always got a question, but I'll leave Trevor alone on this one. It's such do have to ask a question. Have they put in the fire suppression after they did the work?
I don't specifically know if they have been mandated to put in the fire suppression following the fire. I do know that sometimes it's prohibitive to do so in some of these circumstances.
Leave it at that. Thank you very much for your presentation.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ken. We're going to take 5 to 10 minutes. My panel members don't mind.
No?